Welcome to the press conference of the Commonwealth Observer Group.
Of the Commonwealth Observer Group, the former Minister of Interior Ghana, Mr. Prosper Bani. Also with us today is Yvonne Apia-Mensah, head of the Commonwealth staff team. Mr. Bani will be presenting the Commonwealth Observer Group's interim statements, copies of which will be made available afterwards. The chair will then take questions from the floor. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much and welcome. Members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and your excellencies, thank you for coming to this Commonwealth Observer Group press conference. The Commonwealth is honored to have been invited by the Election Commission of Sri Lanka to stand in solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka through these significant elections. Our group, which was constituted by the Commonwealth Secretary General, Patricia Scotland, comprises experts drawn from the political, legal, civil society, and electoral fields across various Commonwealth countries. We arrived in Colombo on 10th November and will depart on 22nd November 2019. Our preliminary findings will be shared in the following manner. We will first provide our key findings on the pre-election environment, after which we will focus on our observations on election day. Finally, we will share our reflections on the post-election environment. This approach is in line with our mandate as underscored in the arrival statement we issued on 11th November 2019. Let me state that in accordance with this mandate, we are assessing this election according to the national, regional, Commonwealth, and international values and standards to which Sri Lanka has committed itself. Our final report will be submitted to the Commonwealth Secretary General and will afterwards be made available to the government of Sri Lanka, political parties, the Election Commission, and the public. I would like to commend the people of Sri Lanka for the largely peaceful and orderly manner in which they cast their vote on 16th November 2019. I also wish to acknowledge the Election Commission for its efficient conduct of the polls across the country. Sri Lanka's long tradition of conducting elections was evident in this well-managed process. Once again, by voting in significant numbers with an impressive turnout of 84%, Sri Lanka have taken a clear stand on democracy, a fundamental Commonwealth value. However, these elections have raised some issues which highlight areas of improvement. A credible democratic process is an inclusive one where every citizen's right to participate freely and safely is guaranteed. We urge the people of Sri Lanka and their leaders to improve on the inclusivity of future elections. This country's rich cultural and religious diversity is to be celebrated and valued. We therefore urge all political leaders to prioritize social cohesion and inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, since our arrival in Colombo, we have had the opportunity of meeting a range of stakeholders, including political parties, civil society, and media representatives, the police, the Election Commission, and members of the diplomatic corps. On 14th November 2019, members of our group were deployed to 6 provinces where they engaged with local stakeholders. These provinces are Central, Eastern, North Central, Southern, and the Western provinces. We were encouraged to hear that although there were some incidents of violence, the campaign environment was largely peaceful. The fundamental freedoms of association, expression, assembly, and movement were broadly respected, and political parties were generally able to freely convey their messages to their supporters. The restrictions on displaying handbills and posters of candidates outlined in Section 74 of the Presidential Elections Act, number 15 of 1981, were widely respected. We observed that the display of campaign materials was minimal. While noting the positive impact of this regulation on the environment, we encourage the continued use of alternative forms of disseminating campaign messages to supporters in a manner that reaches and respects all communities. We also note, however, that some of the recommendations offered by previous Commonwealth observers which will improve the campaigns remain relevant. One is the need for mechanisms to regulate campaign finance in order to ensure transparency, accountability, and an even playing field. We further noted ethnic and religious tensions that characterize aspects of the pre-election environment. We observed that some groups experienced fear and intimidation. We urge all citizens and political and community leaders to prioritize unity and to demonstrate the values of respect and tolerance in political life. In this regard, another issue of concern was the use and promotion of hate speech through private media as well as on social media platforms to conduct campaigns, including well after the 48 hours deadline. We note that for this election, the Election Commission was empowered to regulate public media through a set of media guidelines. However, it appeared that private media was largely unregulated. We recommend that ahead of the next election, both private and public media are independently regulated through a legal framework. We will elaborate on this issue in our final report. Another issue which we will expand on in our final report is the low participation of women in politics, including as candidates in Sri Lanka. For this election, only 1 out of the 35 presidential candidates was female. Sri Lanka has already made significant progress by introducing a 25% quota at the local government level. We echo the recommendation of the 2015 Commonwealth Observer Group encouraging the consideration of affirmative legal measures to ensure increased participation and representation of women in politics at the national level. We were also concerned about the incidence of violence against women during the campaign period. We urge women's groups, civil society, political parties, and leaders in parliament, the judiciary, and the entire criminal justice system to work together to promote and protect the rights of women. On the eve of elections, we witnessed preparations for the polls, including the setting up of polling stations, the collection and distribution of polling materials, and allocation of duties by presiding officers. Polling officials assured our teams of their readiness to conduct the elections on 16th November 2019. Police officers assigned to various polling stations were already at post. While the environment before and during the poll was generally peaceful, we were concerned to hear about incidents of violence, in particular, an attack on the convoy of buses transporting Muslims to vote in the northern part of the country. We strongly condemn this and all other such incidents of intimidation and violence targeted at particular groups. Now, turning to the polls, polling stations opened on time. Opening procedures were adhered to, and signage providing relevant instructions to voters were visibly displayed. In some cases, the polling station layout, including space constraints, did not always guarantee the secrecy of the ballot. However, we did not encounter any incidents where there was a deliberate attempt to take advantage of this situation. We encourage the Election Commission to review the layout of polling stations for future elections to ensure the secrecy of the ballot is guaranteed. We were also impressed by the confidence and professionalism of polling officials, a significant number of whom were women. We commend the inclusion of women throughout the administration of elections in Sri Lanka. Polling officials granted priority voting to vulnerable groups and provided assistance as required. We noted that in a few cases, in rendering such assistance, particularly to unaccompanied persons with disabilities and the elderly, the secrecy of the ballot was vulnerable to compromise. Additionally, while the law provides some access for persons with disabilities and the elderly, we recommend the improvement of physical access to polling stations. Voters' identification was properly checked when voters entered the polling station. Party agents present had access to hard copies of the register, which they checked as the voters' identification was announced. Voters were inked and provided with a ballot paper before proceeding to vote. We observed good cooperation between the assigned police officers and polling officials throughout the voting process. Generally, the polling stations were well organized. We noted the efficient manner in which polling officials processed high numbers of voters. We found very few long queues, given the significant numbers of registered voters per station, up to over 2,000 in some cases, and the 26-inch length of the ballot paper, which featured 35 presidential candidates. In the polling stations where we were present, there were no voters in queues at the close of polls at 1700 hours. Throughout the day, we interacted with citizen observers. We commend the role of civil society in contributing to inclusive democratic processes in Sri Lanka. Indeed, polling officials generally adhered to the closing procedures. In full view of the police, polling staff, party agents, and observers, polling officials finalized reports. Ballot boxes were sealed and secured, placed in a transparent bag which was further secured with a tamper-proof cable tie, and subsequently transported to the counting centers. The senior presiding officer's reports were attached to these boxes. The reception of the ballot boxes at the counting centers was largely smooth. Party agents, citizens, and international observers were mostly present. Counting officials generally followed the procedures outlined in sections 47 to 65 of the Presidential Elections Act, and further elaborated in the instructions issued by the Election Commission. Counting was conducted according to the three-stage process involving verification of ballot papers, sorting and counting ballot papers received by each candidate, and counting the second and third preferences. We observed collegial collaboration between counting officers and party agents, especially in determining and agreeing on rejected ballots. We further observed that in a significant number of cases, voters did not indicate the second and third preferences, pointing to a need for greater voter education on these aspects in the future. Overall, the voting and counting process was transparent, peaceful, and well organized. We commend the Election Commission for the smooth conduct of the polls and the competence demonstrated by the polling officials. In a number of cases, counting continued throughout the night and into the morning of 17th November 2019. The change of personnel for counting is good practice, as it eliminates the risk of human errors from tired officials who will have been involved in the preceding voting process. I had the privilege of personally visiting the Election Commission's headquarters in Colombo, where I was shown the impressive teams, structures, and mechanisms in place for receiving and addressing complaints, receiving the results from counting centers by fax, and in some cases by WhatsApp, and for results, tabulation, and dissemination to the media. Notably, accredited political party agents and civil society representatives were allowed to observe the results process. We therefore commend the efficiency and transparency of the results process. This including the timely release of results within 24 hours of the close of polls, which was complemented by the dissemination of verified and official results in real time to the media. We wish to commend the Election Commission, voters, political parties, civil society, religious leaders, and all of you here, including the media and all stakeholders, for the constructive role you have played in ensuring a peaceful, credible, and transparent election. As I said at the outset, we urge all stakeholders to work together to improve the component of inclusivity in political life in Sri Lanka. Every citizen's right to participate freely and safely in the electoral process should be guaranteed in future elections. Sri Lanka's rich cultural and religious diversity is to be celebrated and valued. We urge all political leaders to prioritize social cohesion and inclusion in future political activities. Through this election, the people of Sri Lanka have once again demonstrated their commitment to the Commonwealth's fundamental values of democracy. We therefore urge the country's new leadership to promote and protect these values for all citizens. Thank you very much for coming. And that's all.
Thank you very much, Chair. We will now take questions from the floor. Please state your name and organization first before. Go ahead. Questions?
The huge problem had been the social media and the conduct of...
Please, your name and organization.
Susita Fernando from Daily Mirror. There have been a huge problem with regard to the conduct of the social media. So there are huge debate going on what should be done. So what is maybe compared to other countries, what should be, maybe the government should follow in future elections, conduct of the social media and hate speech.
Let's take two questions.
Another question before.
Just to follow up to the question, I'm Sanjay, I'm from IRI. Just follow up the social media context, especially in the post-election context, there's been the hate speech has actually taken to a different level. So as the election monitoring body, do you see that as a real threat, especially in the post-election context? And what would be your recommendation on this particular issue?
Okay, thank you very much. Social media falls within the landscape of media. So I think and we believe that to address the use of social media is to address the whole media landscape impact on elections. As we noted in our report, we are asking for an independent regulatory body to manage the media landscape in future elections. And if they do it well, it will capture elements of social media. And obviously, hate speech is what the Commonwealth doesn't subscribe to in any political environment.
Any other questions? Questions?
Does it mean that you've all consumed our statement? Okay.
I'm Shanta from Pepperell organization. What is your recommendation for analyzing the expenses that each candidate would have spent on their campaigns?
Campaign finance. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. In the statement, you identify a paragraph which talks about our recommendations in 2015, and we are re-emphasizing that same point. And in this particular election, we will take it up in the final report and elaborate on it. But obviously, the campaign finance environment did not provide an level field for all the candidates. And we think that we should all play a role in contributing to strengthening that aspect of any regulatory framework for the future elections.
Ratnajeevan, who will member of the Election Commission. This might have happened before you came. The former president announced after the postal ballots were closed that they have secured 80% of the vote. We had not even begun counting, and according to the election laws, that's a very major offense that can lead to loss of voting rights. But in the current environment, I think the Election Commission decided that a warning should be issued, but the letter was never written to him. So what's your advice to the Election Commission in operating in an environment where there is a lot of fear? We don't know who the next president would be. We don't know whether we will be punished for complaining against their team and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very complicated question. However, I would like to respond to the fact that the Electoral Commission must be as independent as it should be. And if the Electoral Commission is independent and applying all the rules of the game, there should be no fear in the administration of elections going forward. The independence of the election must be key, the rule of law must prevail, and then the confidence of the election process adhered to, and then we don't have any problem. Does that help?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Hi, I am Rifty. I'm an editor of a local website called breaking.lk. It's a Tamil website. My question is, in this election, there are some religious places give a big influence to some candidates. Between that, the election commission set up the polling booths in the many religious places. So, do you observe any incidents like this? What is your recommendation on the set up polling booths in religious places?
Obviously, our observers and myself went through polling stations polling stations that were located in religious places. We did not see any obvious intimidation of voters because the polling stations were located in those areas. For distance purposes and ease of voting of voters, it may be the Electoral Commission's intention to bring the polling stations close to where voters reside. If that is the case and there are any concerns, we will only urge the Electoral Commission to look at this, the use of religious locations for voting in the future. If it does not hurt that much and it is accommodating by the voters, I will still have to pass on to the Electoral Commission to look at this. But very interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've come to the end one-to-one questions after this. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.